The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of golden dunes rippling beneath a scorching sun. Heat waves danced over the sand, distorting the horizon and giving the illusion of movement where there was none. From above, the desert appeared serene, almost peaceful, but those who moved within it knew better. Every dune concealed secrets. Every shadow could hide danger. Today, it would be the stage for a battle of patience, skill, and nerve, and the players were among the deadliest on Earth. A team of U.S. Navy SEALs, moving quietly across the shifting landscape. Sergeant Cole led the team, a man whose reputation for calm under pressure was legendary even among elite soldiers. He walked slightly ahead of the others, scanning the horizon with practiced eyes, every movement precise, deliberate. Beside him, Lieutenant Ramirez adjusted his gear, checking ammunition, and scanning the dunes with a pair of high-powered binoculars. Corporal Hayes brushed a small piece of sand from his tactical vest and whispered a quiet joke to lighten the tension, though Cole's expression remained unreadable. Humor was a fragile shield against fear in a place like this, and all of them knew it. The mission had seemed straightforward: patrol the area, gather intelligence on potential hostile movements, and return safely. The team had briefed for hours, memorizing maps, terrain features, and coordinates of interest. Intelligence suggested minimal enemy presence. That was the first lie of the day. Cole knew better. The desert was an unpredictable adversary. Calm could vanish in an instant, replaced by chaos and violence. And every seasoned soldier carries the unspoken knowledge that the desert doesn't forgive mistakes. The sand beneath their boots was fine and hot, clinging to their uniforms, despite efforts to brush it away. Each step left a fleeting mark, a temporary testament to their presence. The wind carried whispers of the desert's stories, long-forgotten skirmishes, unmarked graves, and unseen predators, both human and natural. Cole paused, crouching slightly behind a small rise, scanning the far horizon. For a moment, all was quiet. The sun glinted off his sunglasses, casting reflections across the dunes that made even his teammates second-guess their positions. Private Daniels, the newest member of the team, tried to match the pace of the veterans, but felt the desert's enormity pressing down on him. Every sound wind, shifting sand, distant caws of unseen birds seemed amplified. His breathing was steady, but the knot in his stomach betrayed him. This was his first solo deployment in hostile territory. Training could only prepare a soldier so far. Everything else was instinct. And instinct was being tested with every step through the undulating sea of sand. Cole raised a hand, signaling a halt. The team froze, forming a small semicircle behind the dune. Silence reigned. The desert was alive with subtle noises, the faint crunch of shifting sand, the whisper of the wind across distant ridges, the occasional rustle of a lizard among rocks. The team knew all too well that silence was the most dangerous sound of all. It meant the enemy could be near, watching, waiting, and analyzing their every move. The SEALs had trained for ambushes and sniper fire, but no training could fully prepare a man for the tension of being exposed in such a vast, unforgiving landscape. Hours earlier, in the briefing room, Cole had outlined the operation with clinical precision. Every member had memorized the details, from entry and exit points to rules of engagement and contingency plans. But the desert had its own rules. The dunes could conceal, deceive, and disorient. Even the best technology drones, scopes, thermal imaging was limited by the sun's glare and the terrain's vastness. Today, the team would rely not only on equipment, but also on skill, intuition, and trust in one another. Mistakes could be deadly. The team pressed forward slowly, each member scanning, analyzing, and moving in perfect synchronization. Their boots sank slightly with each step, leaving temporary imprints in the fine sand. Cole's hand occasionally brushed against his rifle, not in preparation to fire, but inhabit a physical reassurance of his readiness. Lieutenant Ramirez paused beside a jagged rock, adjusting his scope and whispering coordinates into his radio headset. The landscape stretched endlessly, a perfect backdrop for both human skill and human error. Time seemed to move differently in the desert. Minutes stretched into eternities, punctuated only by the soft sighs of wind across the dunes. The heat pressed down, sapping energy, making every movement more deliberate, every decision heavier. Cole signaled another pause. He crouched and traced a finger through the sand, studying its consistency, imagining where it might lead. A team member to his left, Corporal Hayes, mimicked the motion, scanning for footprints or disturbances. It was a methodical, almost meditative exercise, yet tension lurked beneath the calm surface. Cole's mind wandered briefly to stories he had heard from other deployments, accounts of skilled snipers who could vanish into the desert as if swallowed by the sand itself. He pushed the thought aside. The mission was simple: observe, gather intel, return. But his experience warned him that simplicity was often the precursor to danger. The desert had a way of teaching lessons harshly, swiftly, and without warning. The sun climbed higher, turning the golden dunes into a glare-filled expanse. Every reflective surface rocks, equipment, even glints of sand could betray a position. The team adjusted, keeping low, moving cautiously from dune to dune. Private Daniels tried to steady his breathing, conscious of how tense his muscles had become. The desert demanded respect. One misstep, one lapse in attention, and disaster could strike. Cole raised a hand again, signaling another halt. This time, his eyes focused on a distant ridge, subtle in its rise, barely distinguishable from the surrounding dunes. He squinted, assessing the terrain. Something about the ridge felt off. A slight shimmer in the distance, a glint that could be sunlight or metal. His instincts, honed over years, screamed at him to be vigilant. The SEALs mirrored his posture, weapons raised slightly, eyes scanning for movement. The team moved forward slowly, deliberately, aware that each step was being watched. The desert, vast and open, offered no cover, yet Cole knew the dunes themselves were allies to the unseen. Shadows played tricks on the mind. A ripple in the sand could be wind, or an enemy moving with silent precision. The tension was palpable. Every heartbeat echoed in their ears. Even the trained veterans felt the invisible weight pressing down on them. As they crested a small dune, the sun reflected off something metallic in the distance, momentarily blinding Cole. He gestured sharply to halt. The team froze. Even in calm, the desert had lessons to teach: patience, observation, vigilance, and above all, respect. For here, in this endless sea of sand and heat, life could change in an instant. And unbeknownst to them, eyes in the dunes had already marked the team, and the calm would soon shatter. The stage was set. The golden dunes, endless and merciless, had become a theater of suspense. Every movement, every breath, and every glance could tip the balance between survival and disaster. Cole felt it in his bones. The desert was alive, watching, waiting. The calm before the storm was deceptive, fragile, and fleeting. And in a matter of moments, the silence would explode into chaos. The serene rhythm of the desert shattered in an instant. A sharp crack echoed across the dunes, followed by the thunder of a second shot. Sand erupted around the SEALs, some grains striking their uniforms and faces. Bullets hissed past, missing by mere inches. The team hit the ground instinctively, diving behind dunes and rocks. The golden landscape suddenly transformed into a battlefield of shadows and chaos. "Sniper! Sniper on the ridge!" Sergeant Cole shouted, his voice sharp, slicing through the sudden roar of panic and adrenaline. The team scrambled, instinct guiding their movements, but the desert offered no protection. Dunes rose and fell like walls, yet none could shield them entirely. Each shot seemed to anticipate their location, forcing them to move in unpredictable patterns. Private Daniel's heart raced as he pressed himself flat against the sand. His training had never felt so real or so terrifying. He fired instinctively at the distant ridge, hoping to force the enemy to reveal himself. The recoil jolted his arms, but the desert swallowed sound and action alike. From the ridge, no sign of the sniper emerged. It was as if the bullets themselves had vanished into the air. Cole's eyes narrowed behind his sunglasses, scanning every ripple in the dunes, every glint of light. The sniper was methodical, precise, and terrifyingly patient. Each shot was meant to disorient, to plant doubt in their minds. The desert magnified the sound of gunfire, making it feel as though bullets were arriving from all directions. "Spread out. Don't bunch up," Cole barked. The team responded, moving in careful, deliberate arcs, each member relying on instinct honed through years of training. Corporal Hayes crouched low, peering through his scope, trying to catch a hint of movement. Heat shimmered over the dunes, distorting vision, turning shadows into illusions. Every glint, every ripple, could be a trap or a trick of the desert sun. He spotted nothing but sand, wind, and the endless waves of the dunes. And yet, he could feel it, the presence of an unseen enemy, orchestrating the chaos from afar. "Stay calm," Lieutenant Ramirez shouted, voice strained but firm. He fired 2 controlled rounds toward a distant dune, then ducked as a third shot splintered sand near his head. The sniper was clever, moving with the terrain and exploiting every ripple, every curve, every glint of light. The SEALs realized they weren't facing just an expert marksman. They were facing a ghost, a predator who knew the terrain better than they did. Private Daniel's hands shook as he reloaded. The sun reflected off his rifle, casting fleeting flashes across the sand. He forced himself to breathe slowly, focusing on what he had learned in training. Track patterns, anticipate movements, trust your team. The desert, once a backdrop for their operation, now became a player in itself, a force that shifted with the wind, influencing every decision, every movement, every shot. Cole signaled another shift in position, guiding the team behind a large dune. They moved like shadows, low and deliberate, feet sinking slightly into the hot sand with each step. Even in the midst of chaos, discipline held them together. Every SEAL knew the cost of a mistake, and yet the sniper's presence forced improvisation. Nothing in their training could fully prepare them for an enemy who merged seamlessly with the environment. Hours or what felt like hours passed in this tense ballet of movement and anticipation. The desert seemed to stretch infinitely, each dune hiding secrets, each shadow a potential death trap. The sniper's shots came intermittently, not in a frenzy, but calculated, deliberate, forcing the SEALs to constantly reassess, to hesitate, to second-guess every instinct. The team's cohesion was tested as never before. Then came a momentary lull. The desert returned to its deceptive silence, leaving only the whisper of the wind and the pounding of hearts. The SEALs crouched behind dunes, surveying the battlefield with strained eyes. Cole wiped sweat from his brow, listening carefully. The quiet was more dangerous than the gunfire. It meant the sniper was observing, calculating, waiting for another opening. "Recon drones up," Cole ordered, pulling out a tablet to activate overhead surveillance. Small, nimble drones lifted into the air, hovering like mechanical hawks. Thermal imaging scrolled across the screen, highlighting heat signatures in the sand. Still, the sniper remained elusive, a phantom among waves of gold. The team analyzed patterns, triangulated positions, and plotted potential traps. Each decision carried weight, and every second stretched the tension tighter. Hayes spotted a subtle shimmer along a ridge, a faint metallic glint in the sunlight. He tapped Cole's shoulder, pointing to the spot. Cole squinted, adjusting his position. The sniper's camouflage was flawless, his form nearly indistinguishable from the desert itself. But the slightest movement betrayed him. A ripple, a shadow, a glint that caught the trained eye. The team held their fire, waiting, baiting, anticipating. The desert was a chessboard, and the sniper was a master of strategy. Then it happened. A sudden crack of gunfire tore through the stillness. A bullet struck a few feet from Private Daniels, sending sand flying into his face. He hit the ground instinctively, his heart racing, adrenaline screaming. The sniper had chosen his moment with perfect timing, striking not just to harm, but to unsettle, to sow doubt and fear. The SEALs realized they were not just facing a marksman, they were facing a psychological strategist, someone who could manipulate perception and patience with lethal precision. Cole barked orders, coordinating flanking positions and suppressive fire. Each SEAL moved with purpose, weapons at the ready, scanning, analyzing, predicting. Yet the sniper remained a ghost, vanishing behind dunes as quickly as he appeared. The desert itself seemed to conspire with him, masking movement, distorting distance, amplifying sound. The SEALs understood one brutal truth. Here, skill alone might not be enough to survive. The hours stretched into what felt like an eternity. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the dunes. Every glance, every ripple, every whisper of sand could signal the sniper's next move. The team adapted, moved cautiously, and communicated constantly. Each shot was met with silence, each maneuver with uncertainty. They were hunters, and they were being hunted. The desert was the arena, the rules invisible, and the outcome unknown. Private Daniels, exhausted and trembling, glanced at his teammates. Even the veterans showed signs of strain. Sweat stung his eyes, sand clung to his uniform, and his muscles ached from crouching and sprinting. Fear was a constant companion, yet discipline, training, and trust in his team held him steady. He reminded himself that every SEAL had faced danger, yet this unpredictability was different. This was a battle against both skill and environment, a duel of patience and perception. Cole raised a hand, signaling a temporary ceasefire. The team froze, scanning the desert. For a brief moment, the only sound was the wind whispering across the dunes. They knew better than to relax. The sniper was patient, relentless, and still out there, unseen, waiting for the slightest misstep. The calm was deceptive, a fragile veneer over chaos and danger. The sun began to set, painting the desert in hues of orange and red. Shadows deepened, stretching across the dunes like dark fingers. The sniper had not been seen, yet his presence dominated the battlefield. Every step, every movement, every breath was measured, calculated, and wary. The SEALs realized that tonight, the desert would become even more treacherous, hiding secrets in shadows and testing every skill, every nerve, every ounce of courage. Cole scanned the horizon one last time before moving the team toward a slightly lower dune. The sniper had struck first, and the psychological impact was as potent as any physical threat. The team understood one truth. Surviving the desert was not just about skill, it was about anticipation, patience, and unyielding discipline. They would need every ounce of training to navigate the shadows, the sand, and the silent menace that lurked unseen. The hunt had begun, and the desert had already claimed its role as a silent, merciless arbiter of fate. The desert's calm had vanished completely, replaced by a symphony of fear, adrenaline, and controlled chaos. Despite years of training and countless missions, the SEALs now faced a situation that tested every skill they had ever learned. The sniper's precision and patience had stripped away the illusion of control, leaving them to navigate a battlefield that was both physical and psychological. Sergeant Cole's voice cut through the air, commanding order amid the confusion. Split, cover each other. Eyes up. Each command was precise, designed to counteract the fear gnawing at the team's edges. The SEALs moved in coordinated bursts, sliding low across sand, using dunes as cover, yet aware that every shadow could hide a lethal threat. Despite the heat, the sweat, and the fatigue, they fought to maintain discipline, even as their instincts screamed to duck and flee. Private Daniels had never experienced fear like this. His first shot at the distant ridge had missed, and now every movement felt like a gamble. His hands shook as he clutched his rifle, scanning endlessly for the invisible enemy. Training told him to stay calm, trust the team, and observe, but instinct and panic clawed at the edges of his mind. He kept low, whispering coordinates and observations into his radio, grateful for the team's steady voices guiding him. Corporal Hayes fired in controlled bursts, each shot aimed more to probe than to kill. He analyzed the dunes for the slightest movement, tracing every ripple in the sand and every glint of reflected sunlight. The sniper's camouflage was nearly flawless, but Hayes knew that even the best made mistakes under pressure. His breaths were shallow, controlled, a rhythm learned from years of combat experience. Still, the unpredictability of the desert, the shifting dunes, the shimmering heat made each shot an act of courage and calculation. Lieutenant Ramirez, the team's second in command, coordinated the movement of the group with a mixture of urgency and calm. Delta Team, flank left. Watch your 6. Cover the ridge. His voice was steady, betraying none of the tension that bubbled beneath. He moved like a conductor, orchestrating precise maneuvers while also engaging his own rifle when necessary. Ramirez knew that even the smallest lapse could cost lives. Every step had to be measured. Every decision weighed against unseen dangers. Cole crouched low behind a dune, eyes narrowing through his scope. He saw the slightest shadow shift a hint, a flicker, and felt the surge of recognition that the sniper was always anticipating their moves. Every shot, every retreat, every maneuver seemed to have been predicted. His training screamed at him to stay calm, to observe, to act methodically. Yet the desert's vastness and the sniper's skill made even experts question their instincts. The team had faced danger before, but this was different. The enemy was invisible, patient, and cunning. The SEALs had to fight not just bullets, but also the mounting tension within their own ranks. Each member relied on the others, yet each also had to trust their own instincts. Cole knew that leadership was not just about giving orders, it was about sensing fear, guiding it into controlled action, and keeping morale steady, even as chaos threatened to consume them. Private Daniels's radio crackled with fragments of commands. His eyes darted to every dune, every shadow, searching desperately for signs of life. He felt the desert pressing in from all sides, an immense, silent presence that magnified every fear. A bullet struck the sand nearby, sending shards of rock and grit into the air. Daniels flinched but held his position, realizing that retreat without purpose was more dangerous than measured action. Survival required discipline, coordination, and nerve. The sniper's strategy became clearer as the SEALs moved. Each shot seemed designed to provoke error, to scatter the team and exploit confusion. Sand sprayed around them, forcing constant repositioning. The team adapted, but the tension grew. Cole could feel the unspoken question in everyone's eyes. Where is he? The desert held the answer, but only the sniper could reveal it. Each member understood that this was not just a firefight. It was a test of patience, skill, and resilience. Hayes spotted a subtle flicker at the edge of his scope, a shadow that didn't belong, a ripple out of place. He tapped Ramirez on the shoulder, pointing silently. The two exchanged brief, coded signals before moving to adjust the team's position. Even small discoveries had immense importance. A minor misinterpretation could lead to disaster. Every decision now carried weight, far beyond ordinary combat scenarios. Cole shifted his position, moving with practiced stealth, rifle trained on potential vantage points. Each step was calculated, precise, minimizing exposure while maintaining line of sight. He knew that a single misstep could spell catastrophe, not just for him, but for the team. The desert magnified errors, and the sniper exploited every nuance, every shadow, every reflective surface to keep the SEALs on edge. Time became elastic. Seconds stretched endlessly as the sniper's presence dominated every thought. The SEALs communicated in whispers, relying on hand signals and brief bursts of radio chatter. Even seasoned warriors felt the strain. The desert, once a passive backdrop, had become an active participant, a landscape of deception, amplification, and menace. Every ripple in the sand seemed intentional, every shadow a threat. The sniper's psychological strategy was evident: sow confusion, delay reaction, and force exhaustion. Each member of the SEAL team understood this instinctively. Every movement required coordination, yet improvisation. Even the smallest error could give the sniper an opening. The desert amplified tension, creating a sensory overload where instinct and calculation collided. It was a battlefield unlike any other, where experience could only partially mitigate risk. Private Daniel's muscles screamed with fatigue as he moved between dunes. His hands were gritty with sand, his eyes stung from heat and dust, yet he remained vigilant. He exchanged quick, whispered observations with Hayes and Ramirez. Every tiny clue, a disturbed patch of sand, a fleeting shadow, a shimmer of light, was scrutinized for meaning. The sniper's patience was matched only by their own need for discipline and focus. Cole signaled for a shift in formation, guiding the team with a mixture of urgency and care. The SEALs moved silently, a ghostly unit in the desert, each aware that visibility was limited and mistakes could be fatal. The sniper had forced them to adapt, to test their limits, and to question instinct. Even in elite soldiers, doubt could creep in, and the desert amplified it. Then, as if to emphasize his dominance, a sudden shot ripped through the air. Sand exploded near Daniels, narrowly missing him. The SEALs dived instinctively, hearts hammering. The sniper had struck again, not just with bullets, but with precision timing that heightened fear and disorientation. Chaos reigned, yet beneath it, the team's training provided a fragile framework of control, keeping them moving, observing, surviving. Cole took a deep breath, scanning the horizon for patterns. He had trained for countless scenarios, yet this was unique. The sniper was not only skilled in marksmanship, but in manipulation, forcing hesitation, exploiting fear, and using the desert itself as an ally. Every movement by the SEALs was measured, yet even the most precise actions were anticipated, challenged, and tested. The sun began its descent, casting long, menacing shadows across the dunes. The sniper's patience and skill had thrown the SEALs into chaos, forcing rapid adaptation and unyielding vigilance. Each soldier understood that survival required focus, coordination, and trust in one another. The desert's golden waves had become a treacherous landscape of uncertainty, and every second stretched the team's endurance to the limit. As dusk approached, the SEALs regrouped behind a series of small dunes. Each soldier's face was streaked with sweat, dust, and grit, yet determination burned in their eyes. Private Daniels exhaled sharply, realizing that even in elite teams, chaos could strike with terrifying efficiency. Cole scanned the horizon one last time before giving brief instructions for the next maneuver. The sniper remained unseen, yet his presence dominated the battlefield. Chaos had been mastered only partially, and the desert continued its silent, ruthless watch. The team advanced cautiously, fully aware that the sniper could strike again at any moment. The desert, once an indifferent expanse, had become an unpredictable enemy, amplifying fear, disorienting vision, and magnifying every movement. The seals moved with calculated precision, every sense alert, knowing that their survival depended on coordination, patience, and nerves of steel. The chaos of the moment had passed, but its lessons were etched deeply into their minds. Here, skill alone was never enough. The desert returned to a deceptive stillness. The chaos of gunfire had subsided, but the SEALs knew the danger was far from over. Sergeant Cole led his team into cautious movement, each step deliberate, each glance measured. The sniper remained unseen, a ghost in the dunes, and the team's mission had shifted from offense to survival and reconnaissance. Every ripple in the sand, every shifting shadow, could betray position or be a trap. Cole crouched behind a small rise, scanning through his scope. Thermal imaging from drones above painted the dunes in shades of orange and red, highlighting heat signatures, yet the sniper's figure was absent. "He's moving with the dunes," Cole murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "He's not just hiding, he's anticipating." The team knew that identifying a sniper was as much a mental game as a physical challenge. Every clue could be false, every movement deceptive. Private Daniels, still trembling from the earlier attacks, adjusted his rifle and focused on the horizon. He had learned to filter fear into observation. Tiny disturbances in the sand caught his eyes-like depressions where a boot might have pressed. Sand shifted unnaturally by wind or weight. He whispered coordinates into his headset, hoping that together the team could triangulate the sniper's location. The desert's vastness worked against them, amplifying both uncertainty and tension. Corporal Hayes crouched beside Daniels, scanning through his scope with painstaking patience. The sniper's camouflage was masterful. Heat signature, reflection, and movement were all meticulously hidden. Hayes's eyes traced the patterns of shifting dunes, looking for anomalies. A ripple too sharp, a shadow too still, a glint in the sun's last rays, any of these could signal the sniper's presence. Every second felt stretched, every heartbeat loud. The desert, once merely a backdrop, had become an active participant in the deadly game. Lieutenant Ramirez moved quietly along the team's flank, adjusting positions and communicating coordinates. "Cole, I've got a potential heat signature near the ridge," he whispered, pointing toward a distant rise. Cole's eyes narrowed. It was faint, subtle a shimmer that could have been anything, a mirage or a deliberate trick. They moved cautiously, adjusting formation to cover each other. Even the smallest movement could betray their intentions. The sniper, invisible and patient, could strike at any moment. Cole activated a small drone, sending it to hover above the ridge. Its camera fed live thermal imaging to a tablet, highlighting heat sources. The screen painted a vivid map of the dunes, every ridge, every dip, every trace of movement. Yet the sniper was still absent, a phantom among the waves of sand. The team had to rely on deduction, predicting behavior from patterns rather than sight. It was a test of training, intellect, and intuition. Private Daniels noticed a faint disturbance, a trail in the sand that seemed to disappear as it continued. He signaled Hayes, who confirmed the anomaly. Cole studied it carefully. The sniper was moving with extreme care, leaving minimal traces, yet no one was perfect. This could be the opening they needed, but acting prematurely could provoke disaster. The team slowed, coordinating movements, aligning angles, and cross-referencing positions. The desert magnified even the smallest miscalculation. Hours passed in this tense ballet. The sun continued its descent, bathing the dunes in warm gold and shadow. The sniper's movements were deliberate, strategic, calculated to test endurance, patience, and resolve. The SEALs moved in careful sweeps, triangulating positions with thermal drones, visual observation, and subtle environmental clues. Each clue was scrutinized, every shadow analyzed. The enemy was as much a strategist as a marksman. They were learning, adapting, and pressing their advantage with psychological precision. Corporal Hayes spotted a slight shimmer on the far dune, almost imperceptible. He froze, motionless, pointing to the team with a subtle gesture. Cole's gaze locked onto the area. "Stay low. Wait for confirmation," he whispered. Every breath counted. The team held their positions, eyes scanning, rifles ready. The sniper was patient, but even patience had limits. A single misstep could reveal him, and the team's careful observation might finally pay off. The wind shifted slightly, stirring sand across the dunes, creating false shadows and fleeting glimpses. The SEALs had to distinguish between deception and reality, interpreting each visual cue with precision. Daniels noted a shallow indentation where a boot might have pressed moments before. Hayes adjusted thermal scopes to focus on the same spot. Ramirez coordinated communication, ensuring that each observation was logged and verified. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, hints of the sniper's likely positions forming like pieces of a puzzle. Cole raised his hand, signaling a slow advance. The team moved in near silence, relying on gestures, soft whispers, and intuition. The desert was alive with subtle cues, the way sand clung to a ridge, the way shadows elongated in the late afternoon sun, the faint glimmer of heat against a dune. The sniper's skill forced them to read the environment with a level of detail that few had ever achieved. Observation had become their most critical weapon. As they closed distance, another clue appeared. A faint disturbance in the sand, nearly indistinguishable from natural wind patterns. Daniels froze, signaling Hayes. Cole leaned forward, his trained eyes analyzing every nuance. The sniper had to be nearby. The subtle trail suggested movement intentional, precise, and nearly invisible. The team's pulse quickened. Every instinct screamed at them. The sniper was close, perhaps observing them even now, calculating their movements as they calculated his. Cole whispered instructions, guiding each member into optimal observation positions. The drones circled overhead, providing additional perspectives, highlighting heat signatures and scanning for anomalies. Hayes crouched low, tracing the sand with his gaze, while Daniels kept watch for any glint of metal or reflective surface. Ramirez coordinated, ensuring that lines of sight overlapped, leaving no blind spots. Together, they formed a moving net, pressing toward a hidden enemy with patience and precision. Hours seemed to pass in seconds, and seconds seemed to stretch like hours. The desert's vastness belied its danger. The sniper's patience was matched only by the SEAL's determination to locate him. Each clue, however minor, was examined and cross-referenced. The team had learned that in desert combat, perception often mattered as much as firepower. A single misjudgment could prove fatal, and the sniper exploited this with every movement, every shadow, and every pause. Finally, a small glimmer, a subtle flash of reflected sunlight on metal caught Hayes' eye. He signaled immediately to Cole. Cole's heart quickened. Could this be the breakthrough they needed? He instructed the team to hold positions while he observed carefully. Every angle was considered, every reflection analyzed. The sniper was meticulous, but perfection was impossible. They had found a clue, a fleeting trace, a whisper of presence in the vast expanse of sand. The team adjusted positions, closing in slowly while maintaining cover. Every footstep was deliberate, calculated to avoid giving away their presence. The desert had become a chessboard, each move met with counter-move, each step a calculated risk. The sniper remained elusive, but with each observation, each clue, the SEALs built a picture of his location. Patience, training, and observation were their only weapons, and they wielded them with precision. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in deep reds and purples, the sniper's location was no longer a complete mystery. The SEALs had narrowed it to a small area of the dunes, a subtle rise that had gone unnoticed earlier. Cole signaled for the team to maintain positions and prepare for the next phase. The sniper remained invisible, but the SEALs had regained a measure of control. The desert was no longer just a backdrop. It was a living, breathing participant in the hunt, amplifying tension, masking movement, and testing skill. The SEALs understood that locating the sniper was only the first step. Approaching, engaging, and neutralizing him would require flawless execution. The hours of observation, analysis, and careful movement had paid off, but the real test was yet to come. The invisible hunter had been partially revealed, and now the SEALs prepared for the moment of confrontation, knowing the desert would decide the outcome as much as skill or courage. From atop a distant ridge, the sniper observed the SEALs like a predator studying its prey. He had moved silently, blending seamlessly with the dunes, his body a part of the shifting golden waves. Every detail of the landscape was etched in his mind, the ridges, the shadows, the subtle shifts of sand with the wind. He was alone, yet completely confident, a single figure capable of dictating the tempo of the battle below. He had spent hours preparing, studying the SEALs as they moved across the desert. From the moment they had arrived, he had noted every pattern, their pace, the distance between team members, the micro-hesitations that revealed uncertainty. A seasoned soldier could hide fear in action, but subtle signs always betrayed thought, calculation, and instinct. The sniper had learned to read these like a book, predicting movements before they occurred. The first shots were deliberate, not intended solely to kill, but to unsettle. A bullet landing a few feet from Private Daniels, the sudden crack splitting the desert's deceptive calm. Each shot was a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. The SEALs were experienced, elite warriors, but fear, even fleeting, could compromise execution. The sniper knew this. By targeting not only bodies but perception, he had forced the team into rapid adaptation, testing their nerves, judgment, and coordination. His equipment was minimal but precise. A high-powered rifle with a suppressor, a scope with variable magnification, and carefully calibrated adjustments for wind, temperature, and elevation. He had accounted for the sun's angle, the shimmer of heat off the sand, and even the trajectory of his own shadow. Every shot was a calculation, each decision measured against variables the SEALs could not anticipate. Precision was survival, and survival was strategy. The sniper's mind was calm, focused. The desert had taught him patience, and experience had refined it into art. For hours, he had moved without detection, predicting responses and forcing the SEALs to reveal their tactics. He studied the patterns of sand movement, the faint pressure marks, and the reflections off rifles and gear. The environment was not merely a stage, it was an accomplice. By mastering the dunes, he controlled the battlefield. From his perch, he noted subtle errors. Daniel's momentary hesitation, Hayes' scanning pattern, Ramirez's coordination signals, all provided clues. Each SEAL revealed not just their location, but their strategy, and he used this information to manipulate their movements. He shifted slightly, ensuring that any thermal imaging drones would see only the undulating dunes. The desert became a living canvas on which he painted confusion, anticipation, and fear. The sniper had learned to fight invisibly. He rarely fired without purpose. Every shot had a psychological effect. The SEALs believed they were searching for him, but in reality, he was studying them. Their movements, their reactions, even their unspoken fears informed his strategy. He remained calm while they adapted, hesitated, and shifted. By allowing them to reveal patterns, he increased his own advantage. This was a game of intellect as much as marksmanship, and he was the master. He recalled training long before this deployment hours spent learning to blend with the environment, to anticipate human behavior, and to operate under extreme stress. Yet no training could fully prepare a man for the perfection demanded by the desert. The dunes were alive with deception. Shadows moved with the sun, sand shifted unpredictably, and heat shimmered to create illusions. Only absolute focus, experience, and patience could turn the desert from enemy to ally. The sniper thought of the SEALs below elite soldiers, hardened by countless missions, yet human. He recognized their skill, their courage, and their discipline. That acknowledgement, however, did not breed hesitation. It only heightened his respect for the challenge. Each movement they made, each tactical adjustment, was a variable to be anticipated and countered. He thrived on this interplay of mind and environment, where instinct and analysis met in a deadly dance. He moved slightly again, adjusting his position behind a small ridge. The SEALs would not know, but his slight shift created an illusion of presence in another location. A faint reflection of sunlight, just enough to draw attention, but not enough to reveal him fully, became a tool. They scanned, reacted, and repositioned, exactly as he had predicted. The desert magnified every detail, and mastery of these details defined life and death. The sniper allowed himself a moment to observe Daniels, the newest member of the SEAL team. Youth and inexperience were obvious, not in clumsiness, but in reaction time, subtle hesitations, and overcompensation. He noted the private's fear and adaptation, understanding that even the best training required time to translate into instinct. Each SEAL, however, was a potential threat, and the challenge was to control the engagement long enough to exploit the smallest advantage. He reflected briefly on solitude. The desert was lonely, vast, and merciless. Days of observation, minimal sustenance, and absolute focus were necessary. Comfort and distraction could kill. He relied on his own preparation, patience, and understanding of human nature to maintain control. Every move by the SEALs reinforced the effectiveness of this approach. Slow observation, anticipation, and disciplined execution. He felt a sense of rhythm in the chaos below, a rhythm dictated by his understanding of movement, environment, and psychology. The sniper considered potential risks. The SEALs were adapting, communicating with precision, and learning from their environment. Mistakes could be costly. Exposure at the wrong moment could end the engagement. He adjusted carefully, using every contour of the dunes for concealment, calculating wind patterns and line of sight. Even with expertise, he remained vigilant. Confidence without caution was fatal, and he respected the dangers inherent in facing one of the world's most elite forces. As the sun descended further, shadows lengthened. The sniper used this to his advantage, understanding that the SEAL's vision and perception would be affected by contrast, glare, and depth. He had to time actions precisely, not only for lethality, but for psychological disruption. Each decision required balancing aggression with concealment, risk with opportunity. His awareness of time, light, and terrain created a three-dimensional map of strategy that the SEALs could not yet perceive fully. The sniper's ultimate goal was not merely to shoot, but to control. He orchestrated movements, created uncertainty, and guided the SEALs unknowingly into patterns that could be exploited. Observation was a weapon, patience a shield, and calculation a guide. By remaining invisible, yet omnipresent in the SEAL's perception, he forced them to react rather than act proactively. In this environment, perception often mattered more than firepower. He noted every clue he could manipulate: footprints, thermal traces, dust stirred by movement. Each minor detail could become a tool, a trap, or a decoy. The SEALs had begun to understand, to triangulate, to anticipate, but not yet fully. He allowed them small victories in observation, feeding their confidence while maintaining control over the engagement. The desert had become his ally, amplifying skill, patience, and cunning in equal measure. As dusk fell, the sniper remained in position, almost indistinguishable from the dunes around him. The SEAL's movements had narrowed his options slightly, but he remained confident in his ability to dictate the next phase. He had forced them to reveal patterns, hesitations, and weaknesses. The hunt had become a game of strategy and anticipation, a battle of intellect and patience. The golden desert waves concealed him, yet he controlled the battlefield entirely. With night approaching, he prepared for the next stage. Darkness would bring its own challenges, but also opportunities. The SEAL's reliance on visual cues and thermal imaging would become both an asset and a liability. His patience would be tested, but his training, skill, and intimate knowledge of the desert ensured that he remained the predator, not the prey. Every element, the dunes, shadows, wind, and temperature, was under his command. From this distant vantage, he watched, calculated, and planned. The SEALs below were formidable, disciplined, and courageous, but he had observed their instincts, predicted their adjustments, and manipulated their perceptions. The desert had become his ally, his refuge, and his instrument. Every movement, every observation, every choice reinforced his advantage. The hunt continued, but the sniper's patience and skill suggested that he had not yet revealed the full extent of his mastery. The desert air hung thick with anticipation. Hours of being hunted had tested the SEAL's endurance, patience, and resolve. Sergeant Cole gathered his team behind a dune, the low orange sun casting long, distorted shadows across the sand. The sniper remained elusive, a ghost among golden waves, yet the SEALs had begun to understand him, his patterns, his tactics, and his invisible dominance. Now it was time to act. Cole's voice was low, but authoritative. "We've observed enough. We know his habits, his likely positions. We're moving strategically, not rushing. Eyes up, team. Watch each other's six." Every member nodded, gripping rifles tightly, scanning the horizon, hearts pounding, but disciplined. The desert had tested their nerves, but training and experience were still their strongest allies. Private Daniels, still shaking slightly from the previous encounters, followed Hayes and Ramirez, moving with purpose instead of panic. He had learned to trust instincts honed by experience rather than fear. Every dune now served as both obstacle and opportunity. The SEALs adjusted formations, maintaining overlapping fields of fire while advancing slowly. Precision, patience, and coordination were paramount. Corporal Hayes adjusted his thermal scope, scanning for any irregularity in the sand. Faint disturbances, patterns in shadows, even subtle glints of metal were clues. The sniper had left traces, however minor, and they had begun to map them. Hayes signaled to Ramirez, who nodded and shifted the team to a flanking position. The desert, once the sniper's ally, now had the SEALs exploiting the same shadows and terrain features for tactical advantage. Cole led the first movement, deliberately exposing just enough to draw the sniper's attention without committing fully. It was a risky tactic, but necessary. The sniper had become predictable in his unpredictability, relying on patience and environmental mastery. Cole had observed a faint reflection in the heat shimmer, a potential mistake, subtle but exploitable. The SEALs advanced cautiously, coordinating suppressive fire while scanning the dunes for movement. The sniper fired almost immediately, a single crack echoing across the desert. Sand sprayed near Daniel's feet, but the team held formation, sliding low behind dunes and rocks. Cole had anticipated the shot. It confirmed the enemy's position without exposing the team fully. Hayes returned fire, aiming not to kill but to suppress, forcing the sniper to remain hidden. The desert erupted into a tense dance of calculation, counter-movement, and anticipation. Ramirez directed Daniels and Hayes, to take positions along a ridge that would provide both cover and clear sight lines. "Move slow, controlled. Don't give him an angle," he whispered. Every motion was deliberate, calculated to maintain stealth while gaining tactical advantage. Even the wind, shifting sand, and glare were considered in their strategy. The sniper had used these same elements against them, but now the SEALs aimed to turn them in their favor. Hayes spotted a faint glimmer again, this time a more distinct metallic reflection. He whispered to Cole. Cole's eyes narrowed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to indicate the sniper's presence. The team adjusted positions quietly, maintaining overlapping fields of fire. The sniper had to remain patient, yet the SEALs were dictating terms, exploiting every minor clue, forcing him to react rather than act freely. The sniper fired again, more accurately this time, forcing the team to dive low. But Cole had prepared for this contingency. Suppressive fire from Hayes and Daniels created cover while Cole maneuvered to a slightly higher dune, gaining a vantage point. Every movement, every adjustment was precise, rehearsed under pressure, and informed by observation. The desert that had previously given the sniper advantage now amplified the SEAL's calculated approach. The team coordinated through silent hand signals, moving in overlapping arcs to close distance without exposing themselves. The sniper shifted slightly, attempting to maintain concealment, yet even mastery could not erase every clue. The team had adapted, exploiting prior knowledge of his tactics. Each careful movement and coordinated volley chipped away at his control of the battlefield. Cole signaled for a drone to hover closer, streaming thermal imagery directly to the tablet in his hands. The sniper's heat signature flickered faintly, a fleeting glimpse, but enough to guide positioning. The team pressed cautiously, their coordination now precise, instinctive, and lethal. The desert became a stage for careful calculation, where patience, observation, and coordination could turn the tide. Private Daniels had grown steadier. His previous fear had been channeled into heightened awareness. Every ripple of sand, every glint of light, and every shadow was scrutinized. He realized that the sniper's advantage relied heavily on psychological dominance, and by maintaining calm and following orders, he could begin to neutralize that edge. The desert's vastness was no longer solely the enemy's ally. It had become a tool for strategy. Hayes provided covering fire, suppressing potential positions as the team advanced. The sniper's previous freedom of movement had been curtailed, his invisibility challenged. For the first time in hours, the SEALs felt a sense of momentum. The predator had become partially vulnerable, and the hunters were no longer reacting purely. They were initiating action. Every decision had to be flawless, every movement deliberate. Cole adjusted his scope, taking into account wind, elevation, and distance. He noted subtle movements in the sand, faint impressions left by boots, and thermal irregularities. The sniper was still there, but his predictability was increasing under the pressure of coordinated observation. Cole signaled Hayes to maintain suppression, while Ramirez moved into a flanking position, preparing to force the sniper out of cover. The sniper's perspective shifted as he observed the SEALs closing the net. His patience was tested. The hunters had become precise, methodical, and relentless. Every movement they made narrowed his options, reducing the room for improvisation. Yet he adapted, shifting positions within the confines of the dunes, maintaining concealment while anticipating the team's maneuvers. The desert, once entirely his ally, was now contested ground. Cole instructed Daniels to advance slowly toward a small ridge, using every dune for cover. One step at a time. Watch the reflections. Keep your breathing steady, Cole whispered. Daniels followed precisely, each motion deliberate, careful, and controlled. The sniper fired again, but the SEALs' overlapping fields of fire and pre-planned maneuvers minimized risk. The predator's control had been disrupted, and the hunters were dictating the pace. Hours of tension, observation, and strategic maneuvering had brought them to this point. The sniper's advantage was no longer absolute. Every subtle movement, every observation, and every coordinated step of the SEALs constrained him. The desert, which had once amplified his skill, now highlighted their careful positioning and preparation. The balance of power was shifting. Cole signaled the final maneuver. Hayes and Ramirez moved to cover potential escape routes, while Daniels approached the ridge with measured caution. The sniper was forced to choose between remaining concealed and exposing himself, or retreating into less favorable terrain. His patience was still formidable, but the SEAL's coordinated strategy had created a situation where he had to react rather than act freely. A faint glimmer of metal betrayed the sniper's position, just enough. Cole adjusted his aim, breathing steady, heart racing but disciplined. The team's combined strategy observation, drone support, overlapping fields of fire, and meticulous coordination had brought the hunter into the open, even if only partially. The desert, which had tested both hunter and hunted, had become the arena for a carefully calculated counterattack. The sniper's calm, meticulous world was cracking. The SEALs had adapted, observed, and coordinated with lethal precision. Each movement they made forced him to reconsider, to react, to adjust. Cole's team had regained initiative. The desert, once an ally to an unseen enemy, now amplified the SEAL's strategy and skill. Every dune, every shadow, and every ripple was now part of their offensive, not just the sniper's domain. With the sun nearly set, Cole signaled the team to maintain their positions while preparing for engagement. The sniper remained elusive, yet constrained. The hunters had forced the predator into a position where patience alone could not ensure survival. The next phase of the battle would test skill, nerve, and coordination as the SEALs prepared to close the distance and neutralize the threat. The desert had been both enemy and ally, amplifying fear and skill, patience and strategy. Hours of being hunted had refined the SEALs' approach. Now, with careful observation, meticulous coordination, and relentless patience, they had regained the initiative. The hunt was far from over, but the tides of control were shifting. The sniper had forced the chaos. The SEALs now forced engagement. And in the desert, where shadows, wind, and sand could conceal or betray, the next moments would determine victory or death. The desert stretched endlessly under a deepening twilight, its golden waves now tinged with red and purple hues. The SEALs had regained initiative, their careful coordination and tactical maneuvers forcing the sniper into an increasingly defensive posture. Yet despite their progress, danger remained omnipresent. One wrong step, one miscalculated movement, could turn a controlled assault into a deadly disaster. Sergeant Cole signaled a halt, scanning the ridge where the sniper had last been glimpsed. Shadows lengthened and merged, making even familiar dunes deceptive. "Hold positions," he whispered, voice calm but intense. "We force him to make the first move." Each member of the team understood the delicate balance: provoke the sniper without giving him an opening, and maintain observation without exposure. The desert, though quiet now, was alive with unseen threats. Private Daniels crouched low, rifle ready, scanning the faint glimmers of reflected light across the dunes. His nerves were stretched, but training and experience overrode fear. He had learned that patience was now as lethal a weapon as any rifle. Each micro-movement, each subtle shift in sand was observed and mentally catalogued. The sniper had made the first mistake, exposing just enough of himself in his previous maneuvers. Now the SEALs had the opportunity to capitalize, but only if they maintained precision. Corporal Hayes adjusted his scope, tracing patterns in the desert that had previously seemed random. Faint depressions in the sand, subtle ridges, and slight heat distortions formed a map of possible positions. He whispered coordinates to Ramirez, who nodded silently and signaled Daniels to move slightly forward along a flanking ridge. Every step was calculated. Every decision accounted for both terrain and timing. The desert amplified mistakes, but it also amplified careful planning. The sniper, perched behind a small rise, observed the team's slow approach. His patience had been tested, and he realized the hunters were becoming strategic in ways he hadn't anticipated. A faint reflection of the SEAL's equipment caught his eye, and he adjusted slightly, keeping a low profile. The desert had been his ally for hours, but now it seemed to conspire with the SEALs. Every move he made would be countered, anticipated, and analyzed. Cole signaled a synchronized advance. The SEALs moved with deliberate caution, rifles trained, eyes scanning, and minds calculating each potential variable. Every step was slow but purposeful, a controlled approach designed to force the sniper into the open. Yet even with careful planning, the desert's shifting sands and deceptive shadows made mistakes inevitable. The sniper's experience gave him confidence, but his patience, while formidable, was approaching its limits. Then it happened. A subtle miscalculation, a single movement by the sniper that exposed a small sliver of metallic reflection, was all Cole needed. Hayes caught it in his scope, whispering urgently, "Got something?" "Faint, but it's him." Cole's pulse quickened, yet his expression remained calm. "Hold, wait for the perfect moment." The SEALs froze, tension coiling in every muscle. The predator had made a rare, fatal slip. The sniper's own confidence betrayed him. Years of experience had taught him invisibility, yet even the most skilled operator could misjudge the desert's shifting light and the SEAL's patience. That tiny reflection, brief and almost imperceptible, revealed just enough of his position for the team to plan a controlled engagement. He had relied on perfection, but perfection falters under pressure. And now, the hunters held the advantage. Cole signaled Hayes and Ramirez to provide suppressive fire while he advanced slightly to gain a higher vantage point. Daniels followed cautiously, every movement precise, every step calculated to avoid alerting the sniper further. The desert sand shifted under their feet, each grain both a potential hazard and a tool for concealment. The team's coordination was flawless, honed through countless hours of training and sharpened by the past hours of tension and observation. The sniper realized, too late, that he had been drawn into a trap. His calculated patience had led to a small, yet critical, exposure. Cole's team moved with methodical precision, cutting off escape routes, coordinating fire, and preparing to force him from cover. The desert, once his ally, now revealed the limits of even the most meticulous camouflage. Every shadow, every ridge, every shimmer of heat had been accounted for, and the predator had underestimated his prey. Hayes's suppressive fire pinned the sniper, preventing lateral movement while Daniels inched forward along the ridge. Ramirez coordinated with signals, ensuring overlapping fields of fire, while Cole scanned for additional signs of movement. The sniper had a few options: retreat further into the dunes, attempt a long-range shot, or reposition entirely. Each choice carried risk, and in the desert's fading light, with SEALs closing the net, the margin for error had vanished. The sniper fired a single round, calculated to create disruption, but it struck only sand a few feet away from Daniels. The SEALs had anticipated the attempt. It confirmed his position further, while maintaining their relative safety. Cole motioned forward, signaling the team to converge. The predator's fatal mistake, a fraction of exposed metal, a brief reflection, a misjudged angle, had created the opportunity the SEALs needed. Private Daniels moved forward with deliberate caution, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Every training exercise, every mission simulation, culminated in this moment. The desert's silence was punctuated only by the faint hiss of wind and the distant scuff of sand under cautious footsteps. The sniper had forced chaos before, but now he was reacting, constrained by the SEAL's strategic positioning and coordinated assault. Corporal Hayes adjusted his scope for a final verification. Confirmed. There. Small rise, faint metal glint. Cole nodded, signaling the team to converge. The sniper's options narrowed further. He could retreat, but the SEAL's coverage limited escape routes, and suppression kept him pinned. The hunter was now in a position where patience alone could not ensure survival. Cole moved forward slightly, rifle raised, scanning for additional clues. The sniper, sensing the tightening noose, shifted once more. But the desert, unpredictable yet systematically analyzed by the SEALs, betrayed him. Small disturbances in the sand, subtle heat signatures, and the cumulative observations from hours of patient tracking all revealed his presence. The fatal mistake, the tiniest error, had allowed the hunters to control the engagement. As darkness approached, the sniper's vulnerability increased. Shadows deepened, and thermal imaging provided the SEALs with enhanced visualization. Every movement he made, no matter how subtle, could be interpreted and exploited. The desert had shifted from a shield to a revealing landscape. His skill, patience, and experience were formidable, yet they could not compensate for the team's meticulous preparation and adaptation. Cole signaled one final adjustment. Hayes maintained suppression. Ramirez covered potential escape routes, and Daniels inched closer to the ridge. Every motion was precise, calculated, and coordinated. The sniper's fatal misstep, a combination of exposure, misjudgment, and underestimation of the team's strategy, had transformed a dangerous predator into a target. Then, at the decisive moment, Cole aimed through his scope, finger poised on the trigger. The sniper, forced to reposition due to cumulative pressure, made one last attempt at concealment. But it was too late. The SEAL's coordinated approach, patience, and careful observation had overcome his advantage. The desert, ever shifting and unpredictable, had illuminated the small but critical mistake that would determine the engagement. The shot rang out, echoing across the dunes. The sniper's movement ceased, and the desert's tense stillness returned. For hours, he had dominated the battlefield, exploiting patience, terrain, and psychological manipulation. But one fatal misstep, a fleeting reflection, a misjudged shadow, had shifted control. The SEAL's skill, coordination, and perseverance had turned the tide. As the team regrouped behind the dunes, adrenaline still coursing, Cole surveyed the battlefield. Every member was tense, exhausted, and yet disciplined. They had survived hours of precise, lethal pressure and had emerged in control. The desert had tested them beyond expectation, but careful strategy, observation, and patience had prevailed. The hunter had become the hunted, and the SEAL's expertise had reclaimed the initiative. The sunset cast long shadows over the dunes, painting the desert in deep oranges and purples. The sniper, once an invisible force commanding the battlefield, lay neutralized. The team exhaled collectively, but remained vigilant. The desert was still dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving. Yet in this moment, discipline, training, and patience had triumphed over skill, patience, and experience. Hours of tension, strategy, and relentless observation had culminated in one decisive turning point, a fatal mistake by the sniper that allowed the SEALs to seize control. The desert, which had amplified fear, camouflage, and anticipation, now stood witness to the hunter's triumph. The engagement had been won, but lessons lingered. Danger, skill, and patience remained intertwined in this vast, golden battlefield. The desert seemed to hold its breath. The SEALs had maneuvered with calculated precision, regaining control from the unseen predator who had dominated the battlefield for hours. Yet as dusk deepened into twilight, a new tension gripped the team. The sniper's previous fatal mistake had been exploited, but the desert's vastness offered endless opportunities for concealment deception, and sudden danger. One moment of overconfidence could erase everything the team had achieved. Sergeant Cole scanned the horizon through his scope, eyes narrowing as shadows merged into a deceptive landscape. The dunes, golden in fading light, hid countless forms of movement. His instincts screamed that the threat was not entirely neutralized. The sniper, though damaged strategically, could strike again from anywhere. The SEALs remained crouched, alert, rifles ready, each heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of the desert. Private Daniels, still tense from earlier encounters, moved cautiously along a small ridge, eyes scanning for the slightest sign of movement. His training demanded patience, yet every shadow triggered adrenaline. He understood that the sniper's mastery of psychological warfare was as lethal as his marksmanship. Any noise, misstep, or distraction could provide a fleeting advantage to the hidden hunter. The SEALs had gained the upper hand, but the desert reminded them that visibility never guaranteed safety. Corporal Hayes adjusted the scope again, scanning the ridge and dunes for anomalies. A faint glimmer caught his eye, a reflection off metal, subtle and fleeting, almost imperceptible. He froze, signaling to Cole. There, over the small ridge. I see movement. Cole's pulse quickened, yet he maintained calm. Hold. Wait for the signal, he whispered. Every second now could decide life or death. The sniper had proven patient, lethal, and cunning. Any rash move could trigger a deadly reaction. The team froze, every sense attuned to the desert. Shadows lengthened, merging into a surreal pattern of curves and lines. The sniper's patience was legendary, and the SEALs knew that the next move would be decisive. Cole signaled Hayes to maintain suppressive observation while Ramirez adjusted the team's formation, ensuring coverage of all escape routes. The desert itself became both weapon and canvas, amplifying tension, fear, and anticipation. Then, from behind a shifting dune, the sniper rose. The movement was almost imperceptible, smooth and deliberate, yet instantaneous in its effect. A single round erupted from his rifle, striking near Daniel's position. Sand sprayed violently, forcing a sudden dive. Where's the shooter? Someone shouted, panic briefly breaking discipline. The sniper had reasserted control, exploiting a momentary lapse in vigilance. Instinct overrode calculation, if only for an instant. Cole reacted immediately. His voice cut through the panic with authority. Positions cover. Eyes on the dunes. Every SEAL moved into pre-practiced defensive positions. The sniper's re-emergence was sudden, violent, and disorienting. Yet training, coordination, and experience held fast. The team adapted, creating overlapping lines of sight and suppressive fire while minimizing exposure. The desert's shifting landscape amplified both fear and opportunity, and the SEALs relied on skill and observation to regain equilibrium. Private Daniels recovered, breathing shallow, eyes darting across the terrain. He realized the danger was as much psychological as physical. The sniper's sudden rise had sent their disciplined formation into momentary chaos, proving that even elite soldiers could be startled. Yet this panic was controlled, guided by Cole's leadership and the team's cohesion. Every member now understood that vigilance had to be absolute. The hunter could appear anywhere. Corporal Hayes provided continuous suppressive fire, forcing the sniper to remain partially exposed while Cole calculated trajectory, wind, and distance. The desert's undulating waves made visibility a challenge, but also provided opportunities. The sniper, having revealed himself, could now be targeted with precision. Every move had to be calculated to avoid triggering another ambush or misjudged reaction. The desert amplified every sound, shadow, and glint of metal, turning it into a strategic element of the engagement. The sniper shifted, trying to regain concealment behind a small dune. His movements, though cautious, left traces disturbances in the sand, faint reflections, subtle thermal patterns. Hayes' scope captured a fleeting glimpse, signaling Cole with subtle hand gestures. "Target confirmed," Hayes whispered. Ramirez adjusted positions to cover potential escape routes, while Daniels advanced cautiously, maintaining low profile and line of sight. Coordination and patience became the SEALs' strongest weapons. The desert seemed alive with tension, every grain of sand a potential signal, every shadow a possible threat. The sniper's skill was formidable, but his reemergence had exposed him to counteraction. Cole signaled for simultaneous engagement. Hayes fired controlled bursts, forcing the sniper to remain pinned, while Cole maneuvered to a position with optimal visibility. The SEALs' coordination, honed by training and reinforced under hours of tension, had shifted the balance. Private Daniels moved closer, eyes fixed on the small rise where the sniper had reappeared. Each step was deliberate, calculated, and disciplined. The sniper fired again, but the SEALs' positioning minimized risk. Sand sprayed, heat shimmered, and shadows danced, yet the team maintained focus, observation, and composure. The hunter had provoked panic, but the disciplined response regained control. Cole adjusted his scope one final time, factoring distance, elevation, and wind. The sniper's brief exposure created a decisive opportunity. Ramirez maintained coverage, Hayes continued suppression, and Daniels observed for additional movement. The desert's elements light, shadow, heat, and terrain were now leveraged by the SEALs as tactical assets. The sniper, despite skill and patience, faced the culmination of hours of coordinated strategy and observation. The desert was silent for a heartbeat, tension coiling like a spring. Then, Cole fired a precise, controlled shot aimed at the sniper's position. The round struck true, and the predator was neutralized. Sand sprayed where the sniper had been, and the desert's deceptive calm returned. The team exhaled collectively, adrenaline slowly subsiding, but vigilance remained. The hunter had risen to send panic, yet the SEALs' skill, coordination, and patience had prevailed. Private Daniels lowered his rifle, shaking but relieved. He's down," he whispered. The psychological tension, the fear, and the relentless pressure of being hunted had ended, but the team understood the desert's lesson. Danger was constant, and vigilance never optional. Every shadow, glint, and ripple had been accounted for in their strategy, and their success was measured not only in firepower, but in observation, coordination, and discipline. Corporal Hayes surveyed the area, scanning for secondary threats or ambush points. None appeared. The sniper's skill had been formidable, but the SEALs had adapted, observed, and acted with precision. Every movement, every suppression tactic, and every maneuver had contributed to victory. The desert, which had concealed and revealed in equal measure, had been mastered through patience, analysis, and disciplined execution. Cole signaled the team to regroup, maintaining awareness as they moved. Twilight deepened, casting long, distorted shadows across the dunes. The SEALs remained alert, aware that the desert was vast, unpredictable, and still full of hidden threats. Yet they had triumphed. A predator had risen to exploit fear, yet the hunters had regained control, turning discipline, observation, and coordination into decisive victory. The desert's silence returned, punctuated only by distant wind and shifting sand. The sniper's reemergence had sent the team into temporary panic, testing nerves and skill alike. But through precise coordination, patience, and strategy, the SEALs had overcome. Every shadow, glimmer, and shifting dune had been leveraged to regain initiative. The hunter had risen and fallen against the relentless skill and preparation of the elite team. As night fully descended, the SEAL secured the area, observing the neutralized sniper and surveying the dunes. The desert, ever shifting, now reflected both the danger and the mastery displayed. One fatal mistake had altered the balance of power, but the team's skill, coordination, and patience had determined the outcome. The hunter had risen, sent the seals into panic, but ultimately, discipline and expertise prevailed. The desert's waves of sand seemed to settle, reflecting the last rays of sunlight in deep gold and shadow. The seals, exhausted but disciplined, had survived the sniper's challenge. Every movement, observation, and decision had been tested under extreme conditions. The sniper's skill and patience had been formidable, but human determination, coordination, and strategic analysis had triumphed. The battle was over, leaving lessons etched into memory, experience, and the shifting dunes.